Adoption brings our worlds together. Adoption brings our worlds together. Come and share with me. Adoption brings our worlds together. Adoption brings our worlds together. Adoption brings our worlds together. Come and share with me. Share with me.
Hello and welcome to the Journey to Josiah podcast. I'm your host, David D. Marshall, CEO and founder of Journey to Josiah Incorporated. I am so excited on today's episode to have with me Mrs. Patty Ruppert. Patty and I actually met in 2003, and neither one of us are old. We just happened to meet then. We could have been in school. Who knows? But we met in 2003 and formed a great bond. We had some years where we were, for dramatic sake, estranged. Really, we just weren't working together at that time for some years. And then we came back together in 2017. And we were excited to see each other. It's like no time had passed and we just caught up and we were back together again. So Patty, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
You're absolutely welcome. So for our guests, the reason why I've asked Patty to be here is because Patty serves another kind of role, we'll say, in the world of adoption. And Patty is actually a birth mother. And Patty, do you happen to remember how you told me that?
I'm not sure I do, other than the fact that your excitement and joy at adopting Josiah probably elicited all kinds of thoughts in my head.
So interestingly enough, when I decided to tell my adoption story on Facebook, in the comments, you wrote this. And I remember if I had dentures, they would have fallen out of my mouth because my mouth fell open. And really, it was because I felt actually, and to any audience member, I don't want this to sound crazy. Hopefully it doesn't, but it'll be what it is. I actually was in a way honored that you felt that I was a safe space. Also, I was completely and totally I was overwhelmed at your bravery. Not that you went through a whole life story when telling me this, but obviously there are people who know us mutually, and I don't know what they know. You don't know what they know unless you've had that conversation with them. So I was overwhelmed with that. So do you remember that at all?
I do. And there are a couple of friends who had either recently found out that they were adopted as young adults, or were birth parents and even adoptive parents. And I think in trying to share a little bit of my story, it's to say, I really admire and support what you're doing. And if there's anything I can do on my side, in my position as birth parent, here I am.
And let me ask you with that, and thank you. And I've always felt that, and we've had other conversation just offline, basically, that where you offered who you are and your experience, your lived experience to Journey to Josiah, which is completely and totally invaluable. And I believe it'll be a particular blessing to other birth mothers or other potential birth mothers, because even in this conversation, we want to tear down the stereotype. There is a stereotype, and we'll talk about it based on questions that I've been asked. And I don't know if you've been asked any or anyone said anything to you, but I know that there are some lines, I think, that are crossed that I personally resent being an adoptive parent. Let me ask you this. When you and it wasn't like you went through a whole long story, but just making that statement, what was that for you? Because it was like, oh my goodness, for me, was it just, tell me about that. I don't want to put words in your mouth. When you felt so free, can you tell me about why you felt so free in that moment?
That freedom came very gradually.
Mhm.
Being a single parent, single pregnant woman in the 70s, there was shame and there was guilt and there was ostracization and there was shame on my family and shame on the church family. And it was a secret, and it was a huge secret, and it was an ugly secret to keep, and nobody would talk about it. And it only happened through a lot of therapy, and a lot of supportive people who did know my story, that and making sure that my children knew the story from me before they heard it from somebody else. So it was a growing evolution in order to be able to have the freedom that I could post on Facebook. Hey, David, I'm a birth mother, so if you have any questions, here I am.
Do you remember when you were first able to tell anyone that?
Again, it came in bits and pieces. Probably 4 or 5 years after I placed my daughter for adoption through Catholic Charities. My social worker, my intake worker, called me up and said that they were meeting with a group of potential adoptive parents, some of whom were adopting international children. And she just wanted them to hear the other side, that in their joy of receiving a child, some woman out there had to make the decision to give that child. And so that was probably the first time I told my story to somebody else who didn't know me.
And you said this was 4 to 5 years after you placed your child
Yes.
up for adoption. Okay. So you know what? Wow. Now my mind is racing in 20 different directions. We haven't really started sequentially, and that's all right. We can flow into it as it comes. So that was fresh and new, I would imagine. 4 to 5 years,
Yes.
that's no time. How were you, what was that for you to be able to, in that newness, have that kind of conversation?
Thinking about it, my heart goes pound, 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 pound. I am always aware of other people's feelings and other people's reactions. So I was at first very concerned about what I said. Everything I said was very measured. And much like our conversations have been, that I kind of get past that, I think, because the prospective adoptive parents made me feel very welcome, and almost honored, which was totally opposite of anything I had felt up to that point about having had this child and placing her for adoption. It's liberating to some degree, although that was just an opening. It's sort of like opening a bottle of champagne, and it's that first pop of, okay, there it is. But it's only been little sips. It had been only little sips at a time that I could think I could trust somebody, that it wouldn't be a bad influence on a parish. It wouldn't be a bad influence on employment. It wouldn't be a bad influence on family. It wouldn't be a bad influence on my parents and that family, that it could just be my story.
So that to me sounds like an additional weight, in that, in you being able to tell your story, tell your truth, using your words, be liberated, you still had to, as you said, be very, very measured because of others. So
Yeah.
do you think that at that time you could fully I don't even know another word. I mean, you're having this conversation the first time you really had it, just 4 to 5 years after. And then still there seems to be some kind of a hold, not because of you, but because of the impact you may think you think it might have on others.
That's correct.
So was there full liberation for you at that particular moment?
Oh no.
Okay.
Like I said, the pop of the cork. But
Mm-hmm.
no, it literally has been an evolution. I can't
Mm-hmm.
tell you that, at one point it was, okay, this is the story. And maybe the true liberation, the true breaking the bonds completely was the reunification I had with my daughter when she was an adult.
Okay. So we're gonna go into this. So now you know what I think we're gonna do a rewind, and I want to go back to that time and when you had to make this decision. Now, as you said, you placed through Catholic Charities. Are you Catholic?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And have been born and raised in all of my life. So yes, I am Catholic.
You're okay. And what year was this that you did this adoption plan?
She was born in 1978, and in early 1978. So the adoption actually went through. My release was 6 weeks after delivery.
Wow.
But because she wound up being an emergency cesarean, I was able to be with her for 6 days. Normally, that is not how it was. They would usher you into a delivery room. You would have the child. The child would be taken away. You would be put on a floor that was not a maternity floor, and released in a relatively short amount of time. And it never happened. But because of this emergency cesarean, I literally was able to spend 5 days with her, which was unheard of. And what I remember most was the Friday night. I was to go home on Saturday. She was to go to the initial foster care placement, and counting her toes and fingers and wanting to memorize everything I could, because I don't know if I'm ever going to see this child again. And I wrote this long, long, long letter to her at that point. So I was blessed, if you will, with an emergency surgery, which in the 70s was, a 6 or 7 day recovery period in the hospital. But on the maternity floor, knowing that this child was not coming home to me was hard.
I'm practically speechless. I can't fathom that, because as you said, typically when you would give birth, it was pretty instantaneous that the child would be removed. But because you had to have major surgery, you had 5 days. So then let me ask you, 1978. So that's interesting. Actually, it was the year before I was born.
Well, that's scary.
Is it? I don't know. Well, no. Because remember, we met in 2003. We really weren't that old when we met. Can I ask you this? How old were you?
My birthday is in January, and I had just turned 19 when she was born several days later.
Okay. And your decision, was it your decision? Let me ask you that.
That's a loaded question.
Mm-hmm.
Was it my decision? Yes, it was my decision. And after meeting with several what was then adult friends, it was the decision that made the most sense. Did I feel like I really had a choice? No, I didn't. The birth father and I continued to be good friends. And he was there, but neither one of us were ready to get married. I knew that I couldn't raise a child on my own. I lived with my father and my stepmom and my older grandmother, so that wasn't a possibility. So what was the next step? I found out I was pregnant in Planned Parenthood, and it wound up that they did the test. They put me in this room by myself. They came back and said, well, obviously you're pregnant. I said, well, if it was obvious, I wouldn't be here. Did I think it? Sure, I did. I had just graduated from high school, and the abortion was planned. I was to come back in 4 days to have an abortion. Their decision, not mine. And I said at that point that I needed to talk to the birth father. And at that point, this woman turns to me and says, you're Catholic, aren't you? Well, yes. Why? She said, because this isn't a baby. This is a clump of cells. At that point, I was 4 months pregnant. And they were going to do me a favor because it was pushing the legal limit of when abortions could be performed. So I was given a little card and told that if I could come in on whatever day it was that I was to come in, I should have $500 in cash and somebody to drive me home. And my problem would be solved. Was it my Catholic training? Was it my experience of researching abortion as a Catholic high school student? Was it my faith? I think it was all of it. And I knew that was not an option. So my option became, what? I can't raise this child. I'm certainly not going to have an abortion with this child. So what's left? Adoption.
Your answer is loaded. I know the question was loaded, but the answer, again, I'm going to start stuttering, and because I'm again speechless. So when you said their decision, meaning going back to this whole discussion of abortion, is this the Planned Parenthood person that you were working with?
Yes. I think maybe it wasn't their decision. It was their presumption. Maybe that's a better word for it.
Okay. And so then she asks you somewhere in there, are you Catholic? And then she refers to the baby as a clump of cells. So help me with how that goes together, because the way that it almost sounds, it sounds like, well, in the Catholic faith, and you would just look at, a baby at that time at 4 months in as a clump of cells. And I'm quite sure that is not at all.
No, it's kind of the opposite. She was telling me, oh, don't worry about that. It's just, if you're Catholic, you think this is a baby. This isn't a baby. It's not a viable being. It's a clump of cells. You don't have to worry about it or feel bad about this, because, this is a clump of cells. And much later, as I thought about it, it's like, are you telling, and I knew better. Are you telling me there's an acorn in my womb? Or a clump of cells of what kind? I know people who have had tumors, and those were clumps of cells. This is a child, and it's not a clump of cells for me. No, it was a dig on the fact that I believed that it was a child.
It's so interesting because it sounds, and here we go, we're going to hedge into something that is a hot topic, and I don't want to go too far and have us both in somebody's hot water, but where I'm troubled beyond measure, and again, and for our listeners, let's go back to that. This was 1978, and so that's 45 years ago. That was 5 years after Roe was passed, right? Around that time. Correct. So, and this was your only experience with this. What do you think that, I'm trying to understand the rationale, I think, and you, I mean, you don't know what everybody thinks, but I'm just trying to understand at this point, because Roe was passed, Do you think that people were just advised to do this because they could? I'm just trying to understand how that even came up. This cells and hey, let's just do this, because I don't believe, and so this is where we're going to get a little help here. I don't believe that that is something that is said right now. I don't believe, I feel like at this juncture in our, and generationally, people are helped to consider all options. You're not just taking to that option.
I agree 100% with you that this is a huge generational difference. And I also need to stay up front. My decision was my decision. And it is not a decision that is being judgmental on anybody else's decision. I need that to be well proclaimed to anyone who's listening. This is not in judgment at all. This was my experience with Planned Parenthood in 1977, because my child was born in 78. My first medical visit, and it was very obvious that I was young, unwed, and scared to death, because it was a legal availability, although they were pushing the age limit for me, that the baby was just like a week or two too old legally, but they would do this for me anyway. If I give the worker the benefit of the doubt, is the only word I can come up with. She was doing, one, her job. Two, she was reassuring me that this obvious problem that I had could be fixed in a way that was private, presumed safe, legal. You don't have to go through this. Here's the answer. It was a one-sided opinion, but when I started to say, I have to talk to the baby's father, that's where the oh, you must be Catholic because you believe that this is a baby. This is just a clump of cells.
Interesting. So I guess now my thought process on why that is, and help me if I'm wrong here, is you said, and I appreciate that, it's important to know she was doing her job. And do you think that really for her, it was her in her way, based on what the norms were at that time, trying to really keep you safe in a way and make you still feel, to give you that comfort and all of that?
I do. I really do. In some ways, I walked in as an 18-year-old child. And in many ways, when I look back and sort of process all of that, I can believe that in her training, she was trying to give me, you're a young adult, you can make this decision. And in her mind, the only decision. She wasn't thinking that there are other options to have. Her job was basically to sell a product. And it's a safe product. It's an available product. It could take care of your problem. Here we are.
Wow. Okay. I get it. I get it. And I think too, when we think about years prior to that, and what's crazy is only 5 years prior to that, what women had to go through in order to have abortions, and what the consequence was for them, because there was tremendous loss of life for mothers at that time. And actually, what's interesting is in my own family. Now, when I say this, I'm talking about in the early 1900s, like maybe the 30s, 40s. I know that was something that happened in my family with a great aunt of mine, who would come here from the South to have that happen, and to have an abortion. I'm saying it like it's not a word, to have an abortion. And unfortunately, she lost her life. And so
Oh my
when we
God.
think about what women had to go through, I think I now do really understand why her approach, that worker's approach, was the way it was, because like you said, here it is, it's legal and it's safe. And so I get it. I get it. I think it just is initially it's like a little shocker. They're like, what? Who says that? But when we think, and I think it's so important for our listeners to understand the time that we're working with.
Yes.
We're working with 1978, 5 years into Roe. It was all still very, very new.
Yes.
And people were coming out of a very traumatic time frame where, again, there was much tragedy with people who felt that this is the way, that this is the thing that they needed to do, basically.
Yes.
Wow. Whew, that was heavy. That was very, very heavy. Let me ask you, and did anything of your Catholic faith influence I know you said you're young and you weren't ready to get married at that point in time. Was any of your decision in terms of adoption based on Catholic faith at all? And not being
Sure.
able to, and when I say that, not being able to be unwed and pregnant. I wanted to kind of give a little bit more context to why I said that.
Okay. Yes. I was committed and believed, certainly born out of my Catholicism, and going to a Catholic high school, and just being in Catholic high school on the first anniversary of Roe, and be just what the dichotomy of the celebration that this is finally legal and available in the United States versus the Catholic belief that this is a child, this is a baby. It doesn't really matter how the baby was conceived. It's a baby from conception, which I believe. I believe with all of my heart.
Yes.
So yes, my Catholicism definitely had that play in it. It also had the play in it because it was an option that seemed a win-win-win. Is a win for this child for whom I would not be able to take care of. It was a win for me because at 19, I wasn't going to come home and try to raise a child on my own. It was a win for my family and the extended life that I had of either friends or school or college or whatever, because nobody had to know if I didn't tell them.
And so I don't know, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. Did you at some point, did you go away during this time of pregnancy, or it just was something you didn't discuss?
I did not go away, but before I told my dad, I had been in contact with a Catholic unwed mother home that was prepared to take me in because I felt so much shame in it, and I didn't want that shame on my family. And he after the shock and disappointment, I'm sure, it was like, well, no, you will stay here. However, I couldn't, at a certain point, I couldn't go to church because I was obviously pregnant. My friends really didn't want to hang out with me. And I mean, there's physical limitations on what you can do at 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 months pregnant. My family all went to my sister's house for Thanksgiving. And I couldn't go because I was 8 months pregnant and my sister had 3 young children and didn't want to get complicated with all of that. I couldn't go to Christmas Mass because I was 9 months pregnant at that point. So I did not go away, but I self-isolated an awful lot. I learned the bus routes really well because I could take a bus to almost anywhere all by myself.
What was that emotional toll for you?
In some ways, it reinforced this belief of mine before all of that I was alone. It gave me a confidence that I could be alone with myself. Before the obvious showing of being pregnant, I walked around smiling because I had a secret that nobody knew and nobody could tell, and this baby and I were having this conversation with each other because the world around us would not accept us and not understand.
That's and it's heavier because it was a weight that you carried alone. And I'm assuming, and correct me if my assumption is incorrect, that was something that you almost had to do at that time.
That's
I'm
yes,
okay.
that's right. Yes.
Wow.
At least in my world,
Yeah.
Yeah, in my world, that's the reality of it.
Okay. So we are going to transition into the adoption process. So you said that so you went to Planned Parenthood, you were 4 months pregnant at that point. Am I correct? Around
Between
there?
3 and 4 months. Yeah.
Between 3 and 4. And let me ask you this. This is because, again, and I think now I'm more intrigued in how things are different.
Mm-hmm.
What was the cutoff at that time? Because now there's so much debate in terms of viability, 15, all of this. When can a baby feel? We know that, like you, I'm going to say this up front. Like you, I believe that as soon as conception happens, there's a baby there. There, for me, is never a clump of cells. I can't reconcile that kind of thing, but I get it based on the time frame.
Yes.
And what the rationale was for that being said. I've now gone all the way over there. The original question was...
I think it was 12 weeks, and I must have been like 13 or 14 weeks pregnant.
Okay, 12 weeks. Okay.
12 is the number that really resonates in my head about. That was the big deal.
Okay.
I was past 12.
All right. 12 weeks is 1978, around that time. Now, don't quote us if something's a little off. Please don't come and say we didn't just lied. We did. It's just, remember, this is 45 years ago.
45 years ago, yes.
So
please.
some things might be a little lost in 45 years. It can happen. Yesterday, we don't really remember too much about. But so that was between 3 and 4 months. Where were you, and how many months were you when you contacted Catholic Charities, or when did adoption come into your mind? Tell me that story.
So the day that I found out I was pregnant, a girlfriend and I had gone to Planned Parenthood, and I had planned on meeting my boyfriend at the time for lunch at some point. And again, the bus system was our friends at that point. We could travel almost all over Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and never worried about a car. But we met each other, and my first comment to him in this shock that I was in, I said, "Yes, I'm pregnant. The abortion is planned for next Tuesday," or whatever it was. "All I need is a ride home and $500. And he is also Catholic. And so his head is spinning. My head is spinning. And the girlfriend that I was with said, "Why don't you go and talk to somebody else about all of this?" So I had a teacher in high school. He and his wife, not a whole lot older than us, were sort of these superheroes to a lot of us girls. And my boyfriend and I wound up on their doorstep. And It was summertime, so he was not in school. When he answered the door, I had been crying, and I think my boyfriend probably was 6 shades of gray. And when he answered the door, I simply said, "I'm pregnant." And he ushers me in. He sat down. We talked a little bit. He got up. This is the teacher. He got up, went into the kitchen, came back with a bottle of beer for the boyfriend and a glass of milk for me, and said, "Okay, now let's talk." By the end of that evening, when his wife had come home and we had had dinner, I explained that I had this Planned Parenthood appointment. And he and his wife were the first ones to say to me, "Patty, there is another option. And why don't you at least look at it?" So it was pretty early on, like the day that I found out for sure that I was pregnant, that the seed of adoption was planted. And the more I learned about it, the more it made sense. A parish priest and I were talking, and my friend's mother, who was a former RN, and I would talk, and she was there to balance my need for medical attention. That yes, I understand you feel very alone in this, but you're not alone because you're carrying another person in you, and that person needs medical care. So this is what you got to do. The parish priest put me in contact with Catholic Charities. So I would say within 6 weeks of my finding out that I was pregnant, the seed, it was beyond a seed. It was a decision at that point that this is really what I was going to do.
And what was your experience when you contacted Catholic Charities? I'm sure there was a huge contrast between there and Planned Parenthood.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Domestic adoptions, again, like you said, this is 45, 46 years ago. But my understanding and memory says that domestic adoptions were slowing down. International adoptions were just exploding. But because of abortion as an option, because some people did not feel the same shame and guilt that I was feeling, there was a little bit more liberation for some. Domestic adoption of infants was down. And so there was no doubt in the social worker's mind, who walked with me the entire walk, was never pressuring me. But the reassurance that this baby was going to be adopted almost immediately was set in motion for me. Not exactly what happened, but that was the belief.
Did that give you, what was that for you? Did that give you more peace, going that route, taking that journey?
Yes. Okay. The end product, this child, was going to be taken care of the way I wanted her to be taken care of. So yes, and that way, my role as mother would have been fulfilled.
I love the way you put that. Your role is, because as I said in the beginning, there is a perception that I loathe when it comes to birth parents. And you said something so profound. Your role as a mother was then fulfilled, because I always say, and this really goes on to both options, and I'm not trying to, compare, but at the same time, when it comes to abortion and adoption, neither one of these are decisions that are entered into lightly. However, what I will say is a differentiation, and I'm sorry if it's offensive to somebody, I don't mean it to be, it's just kind of in my own thought process. The mother in you, because it doesn't make you any less of a mother. This does not make you any less of a mother, said, I love my baby enough that I'm going to give my baby the best life that I can possibly give. Because no matter what, if I'm parenting or not parenting, I am still a mother. I think that is so profound and it was so needed. I'm glad you said that. That's my
It was
soapbox
interesting
moment.
because one of the things that I wound up saying that had been repeated back to me that I said it was to these adoptive parents, I will forever be that child's mother. You get to be mommy and daddy. You get to do the diapers. You get to do the runny nose. You get to do the proms. You get to do all of that. I don't get to do that, but that's because you're mommy and daddy. But that doesn't take away the fact that I'm mother, and I will always be mother.
Wow. I don't even know that many people would have had the fortitude to say that. That's, ooh. What do you think? I mean, I'm asking to recount a thought process. What was that inside of you that gave you that? That's huge. What was that, do you think?
No one else could validate the fact that I had been a mother, that I had carried a child, that the child that I placed for adoption was child. And at that point I was well trained. I could not say my child. I was almost in my mind contracted to never be able to say my child, but my child. I don't know. Maybe it was just God's blessing that I could admit to, again, people who didn't know me, that I claimed motherhood. For as long as it took, and when I got married and had my children, and they celebrated Mother's Day, there was always this hope because she wasn't there. And I had belonged to several birth parent support groups and learned that the Saturday before Mother's Day is Birth Mother's Day. Because without birth mothers, you wouldn't be celebrating Mother's Day for those who have adopted. And so something to validate what my role was as mother.
Well, if the people could see me, my mouth fell open. I didn't know this. So I need to get on my job a little bit more, because that then for me, I'm so happy that there is a celebration of birth mothers. So yeah, Journey to Josiah has some other work to do. We will be doing Birth Mother's Day.
Yes, indeed.
That is, I
Send
didn't know
flowers.
that. That's amazing. And what I'm so excited about is, again, it validates birth mothers as being mothers, period.
Mm-hmm.
And that, again, nothing changes that. And I would imagine that you said this. You said on Mother's Day there was still a hole, because, as you did say, you did get married. You have other you went on to have other children, but still there was something missing there.
Sure. Yes.
And again, I feel like that's important for people to know, because it's not that a birth parent has done an adoption plan and that child is forgotten. It's not. It's not. And I don't believe that to be the case for any birth parent at all. So let's kind of segue a little bit. Let me ask you this before I segue. Did you feel that at that time Catholic Charities was able to support? Did you feel forced or coerced in any way?
Absolutely not.
That's
No.
wonderful.
And I thought I would be signing release papers the Saturday that I left the hospital, and it was made very clear to me by this wonderful, warm, loving, compassionate woman. Oh no, you cannot make this decision right now. The earliest you're going to make this decision legal is 6 weeks after postpartum. And then since you've had a cesarean, you have to have a medical clearance before I'm going to let you sign any kind of papers.
Whoa. So 6 weeks after delivery, after birth, was when you actually signed the termination of parental rights?
Ugh. Yes, I hate that term, but
I
yes.
know, I know. I'm sorry. I know.
No,
It's
it's okay.
um
It's been a long time since I've heard it put that way. So, yeah, but yes, that's exactly. And she was in foster care at that point.
that's incredible. You know, in the state of Maryland now, um, I know that there is a 30-day revocation period, meaning that if someone has signed a document to terminate rights, that they have 30 days by which to rescind that decision. Um, but what I appreciate and that because we associate things and I'm going to say me, I'm not going to say we. Sometimes I feel like when things happened years ago that there was always some kind of pressure to do something. There was a pressure to act, that and so especially where this is concerned. And so I love the fact that was this a nurse or a social worker? This was had to be a
Social worker.
who said to you,
Catholic
we're
Church.
not doing anything for 6 weeks. The compassion there
Yes.
is
Yes.
huge. So what does give me at least, some a level of I don't know what the word is, but what makes me happy, for lack of a better term, is that it sounds like to me at that time you were treated with the utmost respect, with love and compassion. That it does not, at least on my end, sound like you were condemned by individuals that were there to help. Am I
No.
correct
Yeah,
in that?
you are absolutely right. One of my biggest supporters, if not the biggest supporter, um, outside of a little circle of friends, was my social worker from Catholic Charities. And that's an interesting evolution too, because before the 70s, and I have met women who placed in the 60s and in the 50s, who were sent away, um, who delivered at the unwed mother's house, whose baby was whisked away. Papers were signed or not. This baby was never going to go back to its birth mother. Because most of the time, if a girl was in an unwed mother's home before the 70s, at least, she was there because her parents put her there. Somebody had to pay the bill.
Oh,
And
there was
so
a
it's
cost for this. Okay. Whew.
no free room and board.
No free room. I guess that I don't know because this is actually new terrain. I've never had this kind of discussion. So in my own mind, I foolishly thought it was free. I don't know why I thought such a thing, but so it's not free. It was not free.
No, well, at least it wasn't. Yeah, no, it wasn't.
Let's go a little further in. Um, you said that you had the 5 days with your baby in the hospital, and then you had 6 weeks before any documents were signed. She was in foster care until how old was she when she was then placed with her forever family?
That's where it gets a little murky. I was told that the day that I signed termination of legal parenting, or whatever that phrase is,
Mm-hmm.
that she would be placed, that there was there was a couple, there was parents waiting for me to sign papers. It wasn't until 6 years ago, when my daughter and I were reunited and we finally began to share stories, that that's not exactly what happened. I signed the release papers. She was in foster care with a wonderful family with her, but she had very tiny hands and very tiny feet, and they thought there was some sort of chromosomal abnormality, which might have prevented her from being adopted at all. But I would not. Obviously, I've signed the release forms, so I would never have known that this child would be placed in the state institution somewhere if there had been a chromosomal problem. She would not have been placed for adoption.
And that's the huge evolution of adoption. So when we talk about the history of adoption, this is a real thing that based on the appearance, if something just kind of did not look right to whomever, then a child would be placed in an institution. They were not looked at as I almost feel like there was an inhuman kind of thing. Like they didn't look at them in that way because, as you said, well, people would not want to adopt. And it's what's amazing about that is as time has changed, and I don't know what people's thought process was then, but where I'm so thankful is where things have drastically changed is when I was in the process and there were some cases presented to me that I was nervous about because there were some extreme medical conditions, and I would lament and I would talk to my social worker and say, I just don't know. And she would say to me, David, just know that there are families that are prepared to take babies no matter what. When she said there are families that are prepared to take even babies in hospice, as one of my friends said, you could have bought me with a penny and got changed back, because I couldn't fathom that, we're not bringing our babies home to then bury them. So I couldn't fathom it. But does that mean that baby does not need to feel the love of a parent or somebody? Shouldn't that baby still have that opportunity? And so it's amazing how times have changed. So to go back to what you said, because of what they thought was a chromosomal issue there, then she was in foster care
for 4 months.
For 4 months. Okay. And then thereafter is when
that her adoptive family got a phone call. The baby is here, come pick her up. Literally, the baby is here, come pick her up. And so this family, this young couple who had all these issues in their ability to conceive a child or for a mom to carry a child, gets this phone call, your baby is here, come pick her up. What a wonderful, joyous event, except we have no crib, we have no clothes, we have no diapers, we have no formula, we have nothing. And now we have to get this together in less than 24 hours, at least some of it. My daughter's adoptive mom was a registered nurse at that time. And one of the things she had to do was sign a contract that said she would leave her job. She could not work if she was going to adopt a baby. They went to where, I don't even know, I have a feeling I know where the place was, but the place where this transfer was going to happen. And the adoptive mom had chosen an outfit to bring the baby home in. And when they were greeted, this little baby, because she was tiny, this little baby all wrapped up in a beautiful little blanket was placed in her adoptive mom's arms with a diaper, and that was all she had on. And adoptive mom was like, are there other clothes? No. There were no medical records given. She didn't even know for sure what formula or had this child begun eating food or not. Nothing was given to the adoptive parents. And again, I don't find this out until 6 years ago. So that's where the pieces begin to fall apart.
And now that is a huge contrast. in the way things are handled now. And that would be even if it was like this was foster care that your baby was coming from to go to her forever family. But no matter what, there is something. I mean, you're definitely going to have the background. How do you know what to do with? I don't. So that's interesting. I'm just lost on. There seems to be a lack. There just seemed to be such a lack of humanity, and that's a little That's a lot of frightening to me. That's the way things were handled. It just sounded so transactional,
Yeah.
Like you said, here's the place that we come pick up this baby and now go on about your life. Like I can't conceive of that, because that certainly was not my experience when I went to go pick up Josiah, who had now his interim care family they were amazing. And I think he had a few outfits. I went home with, I mean, it was all kinds of things to this day. And that's the unique thing. To this day, they are still very much a part of our lives.
Oh.
And this was interim care. This wasn't, so quote unquote, in a matter of saying kind of foster care, but it was called interim care. But
Interim
still,
care is a much better word, I think, than
yes,
foster care. But that's the only one they were giving me at that point.
yeah, yeah. So, all right, we're gonna fast forward a little bit more. And you talked about 6 years ago. So 6 years ago is when you were then reunited with your daughter. Tell me
That's correct.
about that, how that all happened.
Well, the little bit of the backstory. I was told when I placed that when this child turned 18, she could, if wanted to, come and find me, because it was my information that was left. Not that the birth father didn't want his information shared, Catholic Charities, because most of the people who were involved in adoption on the birth parent side were mothers. They didn't have a line for a birth father, because most of the time the birth father wasn't going to be named anyway. But I had been given permission to write a letter once a year, somewhere around the holidays, since between Christmas and her birthdays, it's kind of close. I would update the adopted family about my life, and they would update me about their lives and my daughter's life and pictures and all of that. So when she turned 18, I did what I had planned, and that was I went out and the only way these letters were passed back and forth was through Catholic Charities. So I would send anything that I wanted to the social worker, who then and so I bought her a birthstone ring and wrote her this letter that was supposed to be a comfort, that if she ever wanted to meet or reunite, that I am open to doing that. So she tells me 6 years ago, when we finally start sharing stories, that she had come home from her first semester of college. And she came down the day after she had come home, and at her place on the kitchen table was an envelope and a box in birthday paper. And she said to her mother, "I don't recognize the handwriting. Who is it from?" And her mother hesitated and said, "It's from Patty." My daughter's given name was printed on the envelope. And at 2 weeks shy of 18, or somewhere in there, she had always been told that she was the one who can make the call as far as if she wanted any kind of reunification or not. And she felt that her confidentiality had been breached because she presumed I knew her name. when in fact, I did know it, but that's another part of the story. But I would never have written that on an envelope. Catholic Charities wrote it on the envelope. One of the photographs that her mom sent me had on the back of it must have had, because mom wound up having 2 children after the adoption. So there was an 8, like 12 and a half, 8 and a half, 4 and a half. And it was the ages of the 3 children pictured in the picture. And mom had obviously written the names, but she used whiteout. Well, what I discovered was whiteout on photographic paper can be scratched off. And so for the first time, I had the name that my child had been given. And I was so full of guilt that I swore that the adoptive police were going to come and get me and throw me in jail because I had broken some sort of contract of confidentiality. What came out of the fiasco of the 18th birthday was my daughter was so upset by it that her parents wrote to Catholic Charities and basically did a cease and desist. No contact from me whatsoever. So from the time she was 18 to 37, I had no contact at all. I did a couple of adoption groups where, birth parents looking for children or children looking for birth parents. And I got nothing. So everything I did from the time she was 18, well, even before that, but from the time she was 18 until we were reunited, was to give her the opportunity of, here I am if you want me. So when Maryland laws changed, I went down to Catholic Charities and signed all the forms that needed to be signed. I was told that any communication that I had with them, there was a copy of it in her file at Catholic Charities. There wasn't a year, there wasn't a birthday, there wasn't a Christmas that I didn't think about this child of mine. And so one year when Ancestry.com became very popular, I started fiddling around with it. And a couple of years after that, they were talking about the new DNA testing. And so find out genetically, are you Irish? Are you Jewish? Are you Native American? Are you whatever? And so I said to my husband, oh, by the way, here's your Valentine's Day present for me. I went and ordered this kit. So I got the kit. It's a spit test. I don't know if it still is. It was a spit test. And I was sitting at my office about 3 months later when I got an email from Ancestry.com that my profile was up. And so I got to see genetically some of the German and Irish and Scottish. And that was really cool. And I had given permission for my DNA to be compared to others to see if there were other relatives. That's how it all works. And not long after that email came a second email that we had found a connection. And it's a very strong connection. It's either parent, sibling, or child. Okay, so I opened it up and there was no photograph, but pink for a girl, blue for a boy. So it was pink. And that the person was between, I guess, 35 and 40, somewhere in there. Lived in Pennsylvania, and that this strong biological connection was there. And for the first time, I doubted ancestry. I thought, well, obviously not my parents because my parents are dead. Obviously not my sister because she doesn't believe in any of this. Obviously not my 2 children because they're not interested in it. So this whole thing is a lie. And I was so upset. I thought, fine, you're going to play this game, I'll play this game. And I wrote this little letter back going, To whom it may concern, I am brand new to Ancestry.com. I just got this notification that you and I share some biological DNA. If you're willing to talk about it, here's how you can contact me. And off I did, and I sent it. And I called my husband, and I was so upset because I felt like I had been taken for a ride with this whole Ancestry.com kind of thing. And bless his heart, he said nothing. He was like, okay. Then I was sitting at my desk and went, oh my God, this is my daughter. And all of that kept running through my mind was the 18-year prior cease and desist, and that they really were going to come and get me. And I've broken some sort of contract that I didn't even know that I had signed, and I didn't know what I was going to do. So I rewrote to Ancestry, who would deliver it to the receiver. Okay. Excuse me for being really dumb in the moment. I kind of figured out who this is. But again, I say, the ball is in your court. Here's how you contact me, but I'm not going to contact you until you contact me. That was the beginning of May. On May 24th, which is my grandmother's birthday, that's why I remember it, I got an email from Ancestry.com that she had written. And she was very guarded. And so we did this little dance for probably about 5 or 6 weeks. And finally she said, putting Ancestry in the middle of this is getting on my nerves. Here is my email. And so we began to have this personal email back and forth. And in her writing, she told me that, her job is technology. And she had seen that I had sort of registered in several of these different support groups and never felt the need or even desire to have any contact with me. And what initiated, and she's fascinated by genealogy. And so she has all of her all of her husband's genealogy, all of her adoptive family genealogy. And something happened in her family where a major player in the family was angry at her family, and broke off any kind of relationship. And while her father was doing some sort of research or whatever, he found out that this person who was his mother had died, and that his family had not contacted him to let him know, because mom was the one who broke off the relationship. And so that started, she was very angry at that. And that started her process of, so if Patty died, would anybody contact me? Of course, the answer is no. If something had happened to her, would anybody contact me? Of course, the answer is no. And so she broke her own cardinal rule at that point, and that was to kind of go public. So she did the spit test. I call it a dance, because it really was this email back and forth. I think we were both very guarded. We were both not sure what to say that would offend or not offend. And then in September, I think, she posted a video that she sent to me. They had just gotten a new kitten, and she was talking to the kitten. And I was watching this video of her playing with this kitten and burst into tears. And my husband was like, "What's the matter?" I'm listening to my daughter's voice for the first time in my life and her life. On Thanksgiving of that year, she FaceTimed me. And she was making things that we think about and joke over. She was making rolls, yeast bread that needed to be kneaded. And her husband says it was the most finely grained roll of bread she's ever made, because her attention was getting kneaded into this dough. It went really well. My husband is sitting next to me And when we ended the conversation, he said, "Did you see it?" "I don't know. What did I see?" He said, "Do you not see your own twin in that child's face, in that woman's face?" And I looked at pictures and went, "Oh my gosh, we really do look a lot alike." And for her, she said she had seen it because her adopted family, um, very strongly, her mother's side of the family are blondes and light hair, and she had and straight hair, and she has dark hair and dark eyes and curly hair. She said it was never an issue in her family, but when you took this family picture of all these little blondes and her, and she said, "You know the saying that you don't know what you have until it's gone?" For her, it was, I didn't know what I didn't have until I saw it in front of me. For the first time, I see somebody that I look like, and there's my connection. A couple of weeks later, and some emails back and forth, we both almost said at the same time, "Are you ready to meet in person?" And we both agreed. So we booked a hotel near where she was staying. And on a Saturday morning, she came to the hotel and we met each other for the first time. And there's all kinds of documentation of it that's pretty cool.
And so there is the evolution of hearing her voice for the first time. And then we FaceTime and we're looking each other in the face for the first time. And at some point realizing we have the same face. And then you get to actually meet. Tell me what that was like.
I am grateful for the photographs. And the one photograph that I have framed and that a friend of mine actually painted is that we are just in each other's arms. And she's crying and I'm crying. And yet there's just this, there it is, to be sappy, you complete me.
Yeah.
And there are no words. There's the picture. There are no words.
So I'm taking a little pause. I'm going to have my own little moment, but
don't do that because you'll get me started.
The "you complete me" thing. I love that. That's beautiful. So what has it been? Now that was 6 years ago, you said. What has that been? I know what is that relationship currently? How have you continued to build it?
There's regular communication. That weekend, I met her husband, who was obviously very guarded, and later has said to me, "I have to say to you, I was scared to death that she was going to be hurt by me." He said, nothing personal, just the whole situation. But he rapidly saw that there was a very different relationship between her and I than it is with her and her adopted mom. Again, mommy versus mother. There have been typical, in my opinion, having raised children, frictions between mom and daughter that are perfectly natural that I didn't have to go through. Thanksgiving is sort of our holiday. The year after we met, they came down to Baltimore for the first time. And so she usually comes down on Thanksgiving weekend.
Okay.
With her family. My stepdaughter and her husband were at the house and met her. And probably the following summer or whatever. And my son-in-law said to me, when she left, "I have to tell you, the two of you were talking and I couldn't tell who was who. Your voices are alike. Your inflections are alike. one of the interesting things that we found out was she has my middle name. And the adoptive parents had no idea, but we have the same middle name, and it's not a real common middle name. There have been long conversations, and almost a symbiotic understanding of each other. But we also have very separate lives. But we know that we're there. Talk about liberating.
Yeah.
Here is the fruit of that seed that I planted in a very fertile soil of her adoptive family. And here's the fruit of it, that we can have this really good relationship with each other.
I hope this is not too personal of a question. What does she call you?
Patty.
She calls you Patty. Okay.
She calls me Patty. For me, the hard part is always, because of my personality, is I don't want to step on anybody's toes. And so in introducing her son to me, to my husband and I, she asked, what do you want my son to call you? And what do you want your son to call me? I mean, if he wants to call me Patty, that's fine. No, you're his grandmother. What do you want him to call you? And yet, again, for me, maybe it's the echoes of cease and desist, not wanting to step on anybody's toes, not wanting to interfere. And she finally said, okay, you have to understand, the way I'm explaining it to anybody who wants to hear it is, I have two moms, and you're my mom. And that's just what it is. And I'm okay with that if you're okay with that. So yeah, I'm okay with that.
So what did he settle? So what was the name? Now I gotta know. What did we settle on?
Grandma Patty and Grandpa Rick.
Perfect. I can only imagine what that felt like as well.
Yeah, that first time was pretty. The wave was pretty hard on that one too. A good way.
He's 9, did you say?
Well, he was 6 or 7 when I met him. He's 13 now.
He's 13. Wow. So he still was a little guy when you met him.
Yeah. As someone pointed out, and yet you've been there for half of his life.
Yeah.
Which was really kind of, oh, I didn't think about it that way.
And that is the special thing about that, because, I mean, while he'll have some memory of before, it won't be much. Really, all his memory will be is as you as his grandma, not really life prior to that when he was only 6 or 7, right? So that is absolutely, that's amazing. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, just that his mom and dad have been, he's an only child. He's way old for his age. But mom and dad have explained the relationship all along. And it wasn't until this year that he turned to his mother and said, so how old is Grandma Patty? And she said, 64. Why? He went, and how old are you? So she was like 19 when she had you. She said, that's right, 19 in a couple of days. That's why she doesn't look like a real grandma to me. She doesn't look old enough to be grandma. That child's going to inherit everything I own. I'm just telling you now. If he thinks I look that young, got it.
Look, let me tell you what's so hilarious about that is Josiah with my mother. So he calls her mom, which is so funny because he's the only grandchild. And so she's wanted to be grandma for so long. And we just, they kind of pick their name.
Yeah.
And so when I think they were in a store together and he saw an old lady and he went on and said something about that grandma over there. And so she's like confused, basically like, well, why is she a grandma and I'm not a grandma? But when she looked, just like your grandson said, that lady looked like one. My mother does not look like anybody's grandma. So, at least to him. And so, well, not to me either, really. But yes, oh, it was really funny. So that there's, yeah, you gotta love it. What can you do? You know, she doesn't look like
Out of the
you
mouths.
can't call her what she doesn't look like. I mean, so I love that. And tell me, what has the relationship then with your other two children? What has that become? Because because she does have siblings with adoptive parents, and then she has siblings with
she has two biological half siblings who are my children. My daughter and I have sort of been estranged for a while, so those two have had no communication with each other. Not that that daughter number one hasn't tried to contact daughter number two.
Okay.
My son lives in Vermont and has not had a chance to meet her, but they have contacted each other through Facebook and emailing and things like that.
Okay.
And it's good.
That's good.
It's good.
That's very good. And us drawing this to a close, I want you to speak. You've really already spoken so profoundly, in my own opinion, to birth mothers. But what is it? Is there something else that lingers in your spirit that is something that you can give to? I know prior to us actually starting our interview today, you were worried that there was something that you were basically, this is not your words, this is mine, relevant. And I had to assure you that you very much are, because no matter what the generational gap is, a birth mother is a birth mother is a birth mother. That doesn't change. I don't care what the 1978, 2023, that doesn't change. What is it that you care to impart to a birth mother or one who is considering this adoption journey?
Only you can make that ultimate decision. But if it is any consideration of yours, you have an opportunity, if you want to, and David, you can correct this if it's wrong, to meet and choose who you would like to have parent your child. There really is no shame in admitting that this may not be the right time for you to parent a child. It makes you no less a mother than anybody else who has given birth to a child. I think it's the ultimate gift to give, knowing that someone else, as hard as that is, knowing that someone else is able to care for this child of yours that you are not. But the gift comes back to you 100-fold when you know that this child is loved and cared for, and that you have made for you the right decision.
I can't personally thank you enough for that. I feel like you have, one, I thank you for your strength. I thank you for your boldness. I thank you for your transparency. And I really just thank you for being you. What I know for a fact is that there will be people who are blessed by what you said, that somebody will have been helped by what you said. Someone will feel, if they feel less than, they will no longer feel less than because of what you said. And when I say less than a mother, they know that they are a mother. You have confirmed and reaffirmed that to them. You've also confirmed to our listeners who are not birth parents that there is a realness to a birth mother. You have given that journey so that maybe even someone who is not a birth parent knows how they should proceed and maybe what they should ask or not ask, but moreover, how they should honor birth mothers, honor them. Well, Lord, we found out that Birth Mother's Day is the day before Mother's Day. So clearly there has been given something, something big to honor birth mothers. And so I honestly cannot thank you enough for this and for feeling, because I feel honored that you felt so compelled to speak with me prior to this and even speak to so many others, because I know that it's necessary. And I know someone has been inspired greatly by this, as I have been, and have had moments of keep yourself from choking up, because that's me. I'm a crybaby. To our listeners, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us today. It is my sincere prayer that, again, as I said before, you have been blessed by what you have heard today. And that in some way, shape, or form, you leave this conversation different than the way you came in. You can follow Journey to Josiah on all social media platforms. Those platforms will be placed in the description. And let me ask you this, Patty. I'm sorry if I put you on the spot in asking this question in the middle of this close. Are you available to any birth mother that may potentially need a little bit more than what they got from you on today?
Sure. Absolutely.
And just know this, audience, I just put her on the spot. I didn't even know that I was going to ask that question, but by what she gave today, and this is just kind of how I operate, I know that you are called to do a lot. And you ministered on today. And I'm not trying to define what your ministry is supposed to be, but what I do believe wholeheartedly is that this is a part of the call that God has placed on your life, to love birth mothers through this process. So, all right, I'm going to have it happen again. All right, so I can stop it. To those of you who always are in tune to Journey to Josiah, this is my phrase. Always remember, adoption changes lives and brings worlds together. Again, thank you so much for this time. I can't wait to talk to you the same time, same place next Friday. Talk to you real soon. Bye.
Family, family, bringing our worlds together. Family, family, bringing our worlds together.